My mom snooped through my room, found out I'm pregnant, and now I have to hide my abortion plans. I thought I'd gotten away with it, my little secret hidden in the back of my drawer, tucked away so carefully that no one would ever find it. But I was wrong. It started with the concert. A few days ago I went to a show with friends, trying to escape the tension at home. My mom has always been. She's the type of person who thinks that no matter how old I get, I'm still under her watchful eye. At 21, I should be able to live my life on my terms, but I can never seem to shake the feeling that she thinks of me as a child. She's always hovering, always questioning, always telling me what I should and shouldn't be doing with my body. When I told her I was stopping birth control because it was making me sick, she didn't take it well. But I felt like I was finally in control of my own choices again, after months of feeling horrible from the pill. The IUD seemed like the next best thing, a long-term solution that would give me peace of mind. But the decision to switch birth control wasn't the only thing weighing on me. No, there was something bigger, something more complicated. I found out I was pregnant a couple of weeks ago. I wasn't planning for it. I wasn't expecting it. It felt like my world had shifted on its axis, and I was left trying to figure out which way was up. The moment I saw that second pink line on the test, my heart dropped. I thought I was going to pass out. I hadn't been trying to get pregnant, and I sure as hell wasn't ready for it. There was only one choice that made sense to me: an abortion. But then there was the added complication of wanting to get the IUD right afterward, so I wouldn't end up in the same situation again. So here I was dealing with the weight of a decision I didn't want to make. I wasn't looking for anyone's approval. I didn't want my mom's judgment. And that's why I had hidden the pregnancy test and the pill bottles in my drawer. I couldn't bear the thought of her finding out, not like this, not with her constant lecturing, her disapproval looming over me. When I got home from the concert that night, something felt off. There was a strange silence in the air, like the kind that hangs around when someone has been snooping. My mom was home, but I didn't hear the usual sound of her on the phone arguing with someone or the clattering of dishes in the kitchen. I immediately got a sense that something wasn't right. I should have trusted my gut. She called me into my room shortly after I walked through the door. At first, it seemed like a normal conversation. She asked about the concert, how I felt, if I'd been careful. Something about the way she said it made me pause. My stomach twisted. "You can tell me if something's wrong, you know," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed. Her tone was almost too casual, and I wasn't buying it. It felt like she was trying to make me let my guard down. But I wasn't about to play that game. "I'm fine," I said quickly, trying to sound calm. "Just tired." She didn't buy it. Instead, she got up, pacing a little before finally stopping by my dresser. "Show me your birth control pills," she said flatly. "I want to make sure you're taking them. I'm not stupid." The blood drained from my face. I had hoped I'd hidden everything well enough, had tucked the test away in the far back corner, buried under a pile of old receipts and pens. But I wasn't sure now. What had she seen? Had she been in my drawer? I tried to keep my voice steady. "I told you I'm switching to an IUD. I'm not on the pill anymore." Her face immediately soured. "You know the risks of stopping the pill. You are not old enough to play around with your health like this." Her voice was sharp now, the concern in her words turning to accusation. She'd never respected my decisions, never truly listened to what I had to say about my body. Everything was about her rules, her beliefs, her comfort zone. I stood up, trying to maintain some semblance of control. "It's my body, Mom," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice, but it was impossible. "I know what I'm doing." Her eyes narrowed, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. "You're not on the pill, are you?" she asked, her tone cold now. "And that means—" I felt a rush of anger flood my chest, hot and bitter. I knew where this was heading. She was assuming the worst of me, assuming I was reckless, assuming I couldn't make my own choices. And that's when I realized I had no choice but to keep my secret. I couldn't let her know about the pregnancy test. I couldn't tell her about the abortion. If she found out, it would be the end of everything. Before I could speak, she continued, her words like knives. You know abortion isn't a form of birth control, right? If you think you can just go around fixing your mistakes, you're wrong. It's not that simple. The word abortion hung in the air like a bad taste. My heart dropped into my stomach and I froze. She knew. Somehow she must have seen the test. Or, at least, she had figured it out. The way she spoke, with such certainty, made me sick to my stomach. I couldn't believe she'd invaded my privacy like that, just to lecture me. I started, but the words stuck in my throat. What could I say? I don't need your approval, Mom. I finally spat, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. This is my decision. Her face twisted into something between anger and disappointment. You are too young to understand the gravity of what you are doing. You are throwing your future away, and for what a mistake. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her how alone I'd felt, how terrified I was, and how much I needed someone to support me. But I knew that wouldn't happen. She would never understand. I'm not throwing anything away, I said, my voice quieter now, trying to hold myself together. I'm making the best choice for me. You don't have to agree, but you don't get to control me anymore. Her eyes hardened, and I could feel the weight of the tension between us. I'm disappointed in you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I won't stop you. I can't make you change your mind. Just don't expect me to be there when it all falls apart. With that, she left my room, leaving me alone with the sting of her words, and the unsettling realization that things between us had changed, perhaps forever. In the days since that confrontation, I've been living with the knowledge that she's watching me more closely than ever, waiting for me to slip up. A sense of violation lingers, a constant reminder that my privacy is no longer mine to control. It's a suffocating feeling. But where would I go? How would I survive on my own? These are the questions I keep asking myself as I figure out the next steps. Moving out feels like the only option left if I want to regain any semblance of independence. But I can't just run away without a plan. The idea of telling her I'm leaving feels almost impossible, especially when we're already at odds. And yet, the more I think about it, the more I realize that staying under this roof, with all the pressure, the shame, and the broken trust, might be the real mistake. I have no idea what's going to happen next. All I know is that I need to be strong enough to follow through with my decisions, no matter what. And if that means keeping my plans hidden and finding a way out, then that's what I'll do. Because at the end of the day, it's my life, my body, and my future, and I can't let anyone take that away from me. Update 1. It's been a few days since that horrible confrontation with my mom. The tension hasn't gone away, and if anything, it's worse. The house feels smaller, more suffocating, like the walls are closing in on me. Every time I walk into the kitchen or pass her in the hallway, there's this thick, silent weight between us. She won't look at me directly, but I can feel her eyes on me all the time, like I'm some kind of ticking time bomb she's just waiting to go off. I wish I could say I feel better after having that conversation, but I don't. I feel like I'm unraveling in slow motion. The weight of the decision I've made of keeping it all a secret from her is heavy, but what hurts more is that I can't trust her. I can't talk to her, and that realization cuts deeper than anything else. She hasn't brought up the abortion directly, but I can tell it's on her mind. She has this way of making everything feel like a sermon, like everything I do wrong is another sign that I'm failing. If she says anything at all, it's always a veiled comment. Something passive-aggressive like, it's so important to make good choices in life. It's not that I don't get it. She's scared. She's terrified of losing control over me, of seeing me make decisions that contradict everything she believes is right. She's a product of her generation, older, conservative, and traditional, but that doesn't make her right. And the more she pushes, the more I pull away. I spent the first few days after that conversation in a kind of haze. I wasn't sleeping well, I wasn't eating right, and my thoughts were all over the place. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing, my chest tight, as if I was suffocating under the weight of this huge, impossible secret. The reality of what I'm about to do, what I have to do, hasn't quite hit me yet, but I can feel it coming. I'm trying to prepare myself for what's next, but there's this fear inside me that I can't shake. What if I don't have the strength to go through with it? I found a clinic in a nearby city, about 40 minutes away from where we live, that offers both the abortion and the IUD insertion. It feels like the most straightforward solution, and I like that I won't have to go back to the pill, but the thought of walking into that clinic alone is terrifying. I can't tell anyone about it, not my mom, not my friends, not even the people who would probably understand and support me. I just can't. The isolation is the worst part. Sometimes I'll catch myself thinking about what it would be like to have a friend to confide in, someone who would listen, someone who would just be there for me. But then I remember that this isn't something you can talk about easily. The stigma is real. The shame is real. So I've kept it all inside, like I've done so many times before. I started Googling everything: abortion procedures, recovery times, side effects of the IUD. But all the medical information doesn't do anything to ease my anxiety. It just fills my head with more questions, more what ifs. What if something goes wrong? What if my mom finds out? What if this decision affects me in ways I can't anticipate? It's hard to breathe sometimes. It's hard to think straight. But the truth is, I've never felt more alone in my life. A couple of days ago, I woke up to the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. My mom was up earlier than usual, and I could hear her clinking around, getting ready for the day. I debated whether or not to go out there to face her, but I knew I had no choice. She was still my mom, even if I couldn't trust her anymore. When I walked into the kitchen, she was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee in front of her, staring at something on her phone. She didn't look up when I walked in, and for a moment, I thought maybe we could pretend like nothing had happened. But I knew better. I knew the silence wouldn't last. "Good morning," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I didn't want to show her how much she had shaken me, how much her words had still stuck in my mind. "Morning," she replied, not looking at me. Her voice was flat, distant, like she was just going through the motions of being polite. I poured myself a cup of coffee, and for a few minutes we sat there in the quiet, the only sounds being the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sip of coffee. I could feel the tension crawling through the room like a low hum. It was the kind of silence that said everything without saying anything at all. Finally, she spoke, and her words caught me off guard. "I've been thinking," she said slowly, as if testing the waters, "about what we talked about the other day." I didn't say anything, just kept my gaze on the coffee in front of me. "I know you think I don't understand," she continued, her voice a little softer now. "I know you think I'm judging you, and maybe I am. But that doesn't mean I don't care. I don't want you to make a decision you'll regret." I couldn't look at her. My chest tightened, my throat closing up. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her how she'd violated my privacy, how she'd assumed the worst about me. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I kept my voice steady. "I'm not going to regret it," I said quietly. "This is my choice, and I need you to respect that." She didn't answer right away, and I could feel the weight of her disappointment hanging in the air. There was a moment where I thought she might try to change my mind, to guilt me into something I didn't want, but she didn't. Instead, she stood up, put her coffee cup in the sink, and left the room without saying another word. And that was it. No more lectures. No more judgment. Just silence. I think she knows. I think she's trying to process it in her own way, but it's like we are both in some kind of standoff. I'm not going to let her control me, but I can't make her understand either. The space between us has grown so wide that it feels impossible to bridge it now. The days are moving fast, and my appointment at the clinic is getting closer. I'm still scared, still unsure, but I know I have to do this. For myself, for my future. I've started to think about moving out more seriously, but it feels like a distant dream right now. I don't have the money or the resources, and I don't want to make a rash decision that could backfire. But every day I stay here, under the same roof as my mom, I feel more trapped, more suffocated. Maybe one day soon I'll be able to breathe again. Maybe one day I'll find the courage to stand up for myself. But for now, I just need to make it through this next step. I need to get through the appointment. I need to get through this moment. And I need to know that no matter what happens, I've made the best decision for me. Update 2. The day of my appointment finally arrived. I had spent the past few days in a state of emotional turmoil, constantly second-guessing myself, but also feeling this undeniable pull toward moving forward. I had tried my best to stay calm, to stay rational, but as I got ready that morning, I felt like I was about to walk into the unknown, the weight of my decision heavy on my chest. I hadn't told my mom I was leaving. I couldn't. I had no idea how she would react, whether she would try to stop me, or if she would just pretend like nothing was happening. It was like we were both stuck in a limbo, each of us pretending the other was completely breaking down. For now it was easier to just go, to do what I needed to do, and hope that I could deal with the fallout later. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. I tried to tell myself I was strong, that I was doing the right thing, but in that moment, I felt like the tiniest version of myself, a scared, uncertain girl. I had always prided myself on being independent. I had always told myself that I could handle anything life threw my way, but this was different. This wasn't just about making a decision, it was about taking ownership of my life in a way I never had before, in a way that felt almost too big to grasp. It was about facing the truth that my mom, the one person I thought would always protect me, had become a part of the problem. I walked out the door without a word to her. It felt wrong, but I didn't have a choice. If I stayed in that house one more day, I was sure I would suffocate under the pressure, the judgment, and the guilt. The drive to the clinic was surreal. It felt like I was living in a fog, like time was moving too fast and too slow all at once. I kept thinking about what I was doing, what I was about to do, and whether I would ever truly be okay after this. My thoughts kept spiraling. What if I regret it? What if I can't recover from this? What if I've made the wrong choice? But then, almost like a whisper in the back of my mind, I heard my own voice, clear and steady. You're doing this for you. You are doing what you need to do to take control of your life. And for the first time in days, I felt a tiny bit of peace. I was making the right choice, even if it didn't feel easy. When I arrived, I checked in at the front desk and filled out the necessary paperwork. The receptionist was kind, but her voice was distant, like she had seen this 1,000 times before. And maybe she had. It made me realize how common this decision must be for so many women, yet how isolating it still felt for me. In that waiting room, I was surrounded by others who might have been in similar situations, some younger, some older, but I felt completely alone. The procedure itself wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. The doctors were professional, reassuring, and the nurse who took care of me afterward was compassionate, telling me that I had made a brave decision. Still, the emotional weight lingered. My body ached. When I finally returned home later that evening, the house felt even more suffocating than before. It was dark outside, and my mom was sitting on the couch, staring at the television, as if everything were normal. I don't know what I expected from her: anger, frustration, maybe even silence, but there was nothing. just the dull hum of the television and the empty space between us. I could tell she knew. I could feel it in the way her eyes flickered toward me as I walked into the living room, like she was waiting for me to speak first, to offer some explanation. I didn't. I just stood there for a moment, feeling the sharp sting of every unspoken word. My chest tightened, and I had to remind myself to breathe. I wasn't sure if I was more afraid of her reaction or of the fact that I had no more excuses left to hide. She was the first to break the silence. "You're back," she said quietly, not looking at me. It wasn't a question, it was just a statement. I nodded. "Yeah, it's done." There was another long pause before she finally turned her head and looked at me. Her expression was unreadable. "I still don't agree with what you did," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "But I'm not going to pretend like I understand it. You're an adult now and you've made your choice. I wish you didn't feel like you had to hide it from me." Her words stung, but I couldn't blame her. I had hidden so much from her for so long. I'd built walls around myself, never letting her in, and now here we were, two people who had no idea how to fix what had been broken for years. "I didn't think you'd understand," I said quietly. "You never really did, but I can't live my life trying to make you happy. I have to live for me." She sighed, rubbing her forehead as if the weight of this conversation was too much to bear. "I know," she said softly. "I know, I didn't want you to make a decision you'd regret." "I won't regret it," I replied firmly, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I'm not you, Mom. I'm not making decisions based on what you would do or what you think is right. I'm doing this for me." We sat there for a few moments in silence, the weight of everything we hadn't said hanging between us. It was awkward, uncomfortable, and the distance between us felt impossible to bridge. But I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. For once I was okay with it. I realized then that I didn't need her approval. I needed her to stop trying to control me. I needed her to accept that I was no longer the scared little girl she wanted me to be, that I had made my own choice, and that it was my body, my future, and my life. I didn't owe her an explanation, but I owed myself the space to grow, to make mistakes, and to own my decisions. As the night wore on, I went to bed early. I was exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally, but I felt a strange kind of relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had taken control of my life. And while the road ahead would be difficult, there would be more hard conversations, more rebuilding, more figuring out who I was in this new space. I knew one thing for sure: I was going to be okay. The days after the procedure were quiet. My mom and I didn't talk much, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. She didn't apologize for what had happened, but I didn't expect her to. She was processing it in her own way, and I was doing the same. Slowly, I started to find my footing again. I looked into moving out, even started saving up. I wasn't running away anymore. I was stepping into the next chapter of my life. The decision I made wasn't easy, and it wasn't something I would wish for anyone to go through, but it was my decision. And that was the most powerful thing I could have taken away from it all. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and for the first time in a long time, I was proud of that.